So I already know what the fight is, right? It's the Fame Monster versus Born This Way. I know that's why most of you click this video, but that's not even like the most important thing here. The real challenge is going to be, where do I put A Star Is Born, the Harlequin album, the Tony Bennett stuff, and I know you're gonna hate me, I know, but Chromatica. Because I don't think Chromatica aged as well as we all wish that it did. But we'll get there. Hello, my name is Cedric, and if you're new here, I make videos on pop music and pop culture, and today we are going to be ranking Lady Gaga's albums in order by impact. Not by what I stream the most, not by music quality or what I truly feel like is the best music-wise, like sonically. We are just going off of impact, and we're talking about cultural, career, and commercial impact. I'm counting the Fame Monster separately. I'm including the Tony Bennett stuff. I'm also including these soundtracks that she has done, like A Star Is Born, because I truly believe that A Star Is Born is just way too big of a project not to be included. But unfortunately, if I include A Star Is Born, then I have to include the Harlequin album from the Joker 2 Folie à Deux movie, which was, I would call that album more of like a fart in the wind than anything, but we'll get there. I'm gonna talk about every single album in order of release, and then at the end, we are going to officially rank each album by cultural impact. So first up, we are talking about Lady Gaga's debut album, The Fame, which is one of my personal favorite albums that she's ever released. It is the one that I have the vinyl for. Look at her, look at her. This album in particular is so special to me because it's like, you know, not just mine, but all of our introduction into Gaga. The Fame introduced Gaga as a real commercial force, not just like some novelty act that would come and go or how, you know, be a one-hit wonder. Like Gaga really, with her first album, cemented herself as someone, you know, really in line to be one of the next highly successful global pop sensations. Gaga came out swinging. Just Dance and Poker Face both hit #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. And it truly was the body of work that really propelled Gaga to at least be considered for a highly successful, highly well-known pop superstar. And it really helped to establish her image-heavy, concept focus template that we would see kind of repeated throughout her different eras in different ways. I was a bit young when this album came out. This album came out, I think I was in like 7th or 8th grade. I was in middle school. But when I tell you, like, Just Dance, Poker Face, Love Game, these are songs that you could not escape. They were everywhere. Everyone wanted to do like, you know, the okay symbol with their eye because it just ate, you know. The music videos were conceptual. They were also fun and really captured this like youthful dance pop energy that was so prevalent in, you know, clubs and house parties at the time. This album was truly the beginning, not just for Gaga's career, obviously, but just the beginning of the public really honing in on an artist who was trying her best to break the mold, right? Obviously, there were, you know, avant-garde, cool, different looks happening with pop stars at the time, but not in the way that Gaga was doing it. Gaga completely changed the game when it came to fashion and making fashion and your looks part of the story you're trying to tell with your brand. I wouldn't say this album made her into like some like immortal pop figure yet, but it really did open the doors for her. And honestly, this album is a non-skip for me. This album really put Gaga on the map, and it set her up for one of the most incredible home runs that I personally feel like she has ever gone on up until this point, like this current present moment. She released The Fame Monster. Now, The Fame Monster is an album that you, on first glance, like if you weren't like around for the moment, you would think The Fame Monster is just like an extension of The Fame, and it's, you know, especially because like when she released The Fame Monster, it basically was like an extension EP. The Fame Monster had like side 1 that had all of the new songs, and then side B, which had basically every song from The Fame. So I could totally understand if you look at that and you think like, oh, it's basically the same album. She's just like releasing a couple of extra deluxe tracks or whatever. Girl, The Fame Monster was a revolution. That album, that whole era was untouched. It was untouchable. The Fame Monster truly shifted how the public viewed Gaga as an artist. It is the project that turned Gaga from a pop star into like a full event. Something that felt like they had a full machine backing them. And it was almost like she couldn't fail at the time. Unless you're like super, super young, like you know, Gen Z, Gen Alpha type, you remember the shift you felt, the earthquake you felt when she released Bad Romance. Bad Romance, I'm trying to find the words for that moment. It was the launch of so much when it came to Gaga's perception. It was darker, it was sharper, it was more theatrical, more controlled, and just overall, Gaga was impossible to look away from. I truly believe that the Fame Monster was the moment that Gaga truly launched into the stratosphere. It's the moment that Gaga became kind of a worldwide phenomenon almost overnight. And the Fame Monster is another one where it's basically no skips. Like, I'm trying to think of a song that I would not listen to again, and I don't think any of them, like every single song was phenomenal. You had Bad Romance, you had Alejandro, Monster, you had Telephone with Beyonce. Like, bro, the Fame Monster, in my opinion to this day, aside from an album maybe like Teenage Dream, Katy Perry, the Fame Monster was, in my opinion, up there. Teenage Dream had hit after hit after hit after hit, right? But the Fame Monster had multiple hits, but also cemented this idea of an artist into the minds of not just her fans, but the general public perceiving her. This is when all the like Illuminati, Gaga is demonic and stuff conversations really started to gain steam and momentum. This era really gave her a bigger digital and just had an overall commercial footprint. And she spearheaded this movement of pushing darker dance pop more into the mainstream. After she released this album, all of a sudden, all of the artists who were popular around that time had to start going a little darker. One of the things that I remember most about this era was the Telephone video. From before it came out to after it came out. Man, ooh, to this day, I don't think there is another music video that hit me the way that video hit me. From the cigarette glasses, to the caution tape outfit, to the honeybee, like that whole video was incredible. And not even, that's just the first like half. The second half, when they go and they poison a whole damn Denny's or IHOP or whatever, and then dance around the dead bodies. When I tell you my jaw was on the floor and I only had one thought once the video was over, I have to learn this choreography. And best believe I did. I was obsessed. And I know that I wasn't the only one. There were so many little gay boys around that time who were just getting their life. Because it's like, you have an artist who truly feels like she's there for you. She is there to obviously bring her own artistry to life, but she truly felt like an ally. She truly felt like someone that's not just for the community, but also represents our resilience and our power through the way that she manifests her art, the way that she brings the things that inspire her through her artistic lens and create something out of it. It was such a damn moment. It was so good. The Fame made Gaga a star, but the Fame Monster made her a household name. Like, that is how impactful this album was. I can go on and on about the Fame Monster, but this is where the real fight begins, because while the Fame Monster was incredibly impactful, somehow, some way, Gaga got even bigger with Born This Way. What do you say about Born This Way? Born This Way. What a moment Born This Way was, right? I truly feel like Born This Way as a project, as an era, was the purest form of Gaga that we had ever gotten. And it was her biggest worldview album, like the album where we truly got a sense of Gaga's worldview. This is really where I feel like Gaga became more than just a pop event, but she started sounding a lot more like she had her own ideology. First of all, Born This Way debuted at #1 because of course it did. It started a massive cultural conversation for so many reasons. One, Gaga was starting to lean into imagery that it was more political. It was a little more messy than I would argue that the Fame Monster was, because it felt like Gaga really was trying to dip her toe into a bunch of different corners of the house that she is, if that makes any sense. Like, she is a house. She showed us certain rooms in this house, but we haven't seen every single room. And this is her being like, here is every single room of the house at once. This is where she started to go even further with her visual identity. Like, she started wearing the prosthetic horns, which I remember my family, like my mom specifically, was just like, is she the devil? Like, didn't at that time she was talking about how she like was strongly considering, or at one time she strongly considered getting those horns like surgically implanted. Like, she wanted the horns all the time. What a time. Gaga had leaned into religious imagery before Born This Way, because you have Alejandro, for example. That was really a religious conversation at the time that it happened. But Gaga was like, you know what? If you thought that I was about to talk about Christianity now, just wait, baby. Like, we had Judas, we had Black Jesus, Amen fashion. If I had to describe this album, I would say it's Gaga's most politically controversial album, and the album of hers that felt the most culturally central for a lot of queer, gay, LGBTQIA plus listeners. It was the first album where Gaga like explicitly talked about gay, lesbian, no matter gay, straight or bi, lesbians, transgender life. Like, yeah, there were songs before, like say Poker Face, where she alluded to bisexuality and things like that. But like, this was the album where she was like, you know what? If I say that I'm an activist, if I say that I'm an artist that is supporting and for this community, I have to like actually say that. I have to actually say these things in my lyrics. When I tell you, that felt like a warm hug from someone that feels almost like a goddess-like entity. I can't even, because I was in high school when this came out, and imagine, you know, you have this little cute gay Black boy in high school who's just trying to find himself, trying to find like what speaks to him, trying to navigate through bullying and homophobia and stuff in high school. And you have this artist who I admired like crazy. I truly felt like Gaga was like, he was like one of my idols. And so to have an artist like Gaga who was very, in this album, explicit about her identity, politics, and imagery, it just made her feel, you know, more diverse when it came to like just public life and the public perception, but more risky, more outspoken. And as someone who was trying to find their voice at that time, like it really just helped to cement me as a person around that time. And I thank this album for who I am today. I know that sounds dramatic, but like I truly feel like this album, out of all of Gaga's albums, impacted me the most in terms of who I have become. What a time, man. What a time. The Born This Way album was monumental. Next up is art pop. Art pop is an interesting era. So first of all, if you haven't yet, make sure that you go and buy art pop on iTunes. That, if you don't know what I'm talking about, or it doesn't make sense to you, that's fine. You weren't around for this or whatever. But like, when I tell you, if I had to give this era a title, it would be Buy Art Pop on iTunes. I'll never forget, my best friend got his first car, and I literally used a marker and wrote Buy Art Pop on iTunes on his back window while we were in college. I wanted everyone to support my girl, like, and you know damn well that like, if the movement around an album is trying to force everyone to buy it, it's probably not the most commercially successful album, but you know, it's fine. I wouldn't say art pop for Gaga was like peak impact, but I would say that it's like peak risk. Gaga made some risky decisions with this album, which is crazy because if you consider like her last era, Born This Way, was incredibly risky. Like, I mean, she literally wore slabs of meat to an award show. Can we talk? She literally went to the fucking grocery store and just got slabs of meat. She just got chicken, steak, turkey, pork, and was like, went to a designer and was like, make me a dress. This is also where she had the award show, the Grammys, where she arrived in the big egg. And then she got on stage and performed in like her like condom couture outfits. Bro, when I tell you I have been through it with this woman. While I do believe that art pop kind of missed the cultural takeover that all of her previous albums were successful in, I do applaud Gaga for how risky she was with this art pop album. It was polarizing, it was high energy, it was very like maximalist. I don't know what was going on with Gaga in her personal life, but this really felt like the era where Gaga was experimenting the most. For the Fame, it felt like that was her beginning. Then she gets into the Fame Monster, which felt like a natural progression, but also was like different and interesting and just you couldn't look away from it. And then we get into Born This Way, where it's like she is continuing that, but I would say the music on Born This Way feels less the Fame Monster, and more of like just a totally different genre altogether. But you still feel Gaga in that. Art pop was... I lost my train of thought because I was thinking about swine. Remember swine? Swine! Oh my God. Secondhand embarrassment. She was a mix of like rave and mermaid, but also like very rich, wealthy, expensive vibes with Guy, where she rented out that it was like a hotel or something, or like a museum or something that she rented out, which is like a ridiculous amount of money. They don't typically allow people to rent that place out, and she was able to get it done. It's like a Donatella, Versace type of vibe or whatever. This era was so all over the place. Let's not forget she did a song with R. Kelly, and then that didn't work, so she like kind of switched him out with Christina Aguilera. In hindsight, I think a lot of fans and critics are split on art pop. Some call it ahead of its time, misunderstood. I think I would probably fall into that category, and others just call it a big, chaotic mess of an album. And to be fair, I don't blame those people, because it kind of was. I would say people perceive it, like in hindsight, much stronger than they did when the album first came out. I don't think that's enough to fully rewrite the impact this album had in terms of people looking at Gaga and being like, if the meat wasn't enough, you throwing up on somebody was like my final nail in the coffin. I think I'm good on you. Now, personally speaking, for myself, my own personal opinion, this is one of my favorite Gaga albums. Not because it's like a start to finish non-skip album, because it definitely is not that, but it is just like a representation of an artist who has been basically at the top of their game for years and years and years at this point. Someone who was really trying to reinvent themselves again and figure out the best way to do that. Someone who is taking really big swings, and it's just like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, some things stick and some things don't. I do think that we went a little far at times. I will say that this album has one of my favorite Gaga songs of all time with Gypsy. I feel like Gypsy is like one of her best songs. And then after all that chaos, Gaga comes out of nowhere and changes the entire public conversation around her and her music completely. I remember when I first heard that Gaga was doing an album with Tony Bennett, and it was just like, but why? Like, Gaga is an EDM hyper dark pop artist. Like, why is she doing a jazz album? It just didn't feel like it really fit her brand. And in hindsight, like, that could not be further from the truth. This was a very sneaky, but also very important career pivot for her. This project single-handedly shifted the conversation and the public perception of Gaga from like crazy pop star with crazy outfits and crazy, music videos and things, to a well-respected vocalist, which is something that not a lot of artists can say they've done. It's so easy to just continue on with the things that have made you a success in the past. It is so, I would assume it's so nerve-wracking to go, I've done this thing for over a decade. Now I'm going to shift and do something completely different with a completely different audience. The Cheek to Cheek Jazz album debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. It won Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album. And I would say it's consistently cited among her Sound of Music Oscar performance as the moment when broader audiences kind of recalibrated how seriously they took Gaga as a singer, as a vocalist. This is the era where I truly remember the conversation changing in real time. People knew that she was musically inclined, but I don't think people really understood just how much she was contributing to the image and the music that we were hearing from her as an artist. But it wasn't until this jazz album that people were like, oh, wait, like, she really can sing. I remember the Lady is a Tramp video going viral because people were like, first of all, she looks cute. I love the blue hair, very Edge of Glory. And I do think it helped a lot that she didn't just like, out of the blue release a jazz album and expect people to just kind of, soak it up. And, then she releases music videos and kind of treat it as like a typical album cycle. She said, okay, I'm going to switch genres. I'm going to do a jazz album, but I'm going to do it with an artist who is already well respected in this genre, in this field. That really gave her kind of a stepping stone into this new world. And it allowed us to go, okay, she's not just stepping into a new genre, a new music style, but she's doing it with someone that we know is going to produce good music. So we'll give this a chance. And I really do feel like this and that Oscar performance completely shifted the way the public viewed her talent. This album definitely didn't make Gaga bigger in the same way that, say, like the Fame Monster did, but it did make her much more of a legitimate artist in a lot of people's eyes. Next up is Joanne. And Joanne is another album that is just just an interesting conversation to have, kind of like Cheek to Cheek, where, yeah, it was, again, not the most successful, but these feel more like reputation projects over projects that really feel like the artist that we know as Lady Gaga. I've seen interviews of Gaga where she has basically said that, like, you know, when she was making Joanne, she truly needed a step away from the Gaga that we always knew. Again, I don't know exactly what was going on during her personal life, but this truly felt like an album that was completely different than everything else she had done before. Joanne also had a very, like, down the middle split between critics and fans in terms of whether they enjoyed the album or not. There's a lot of people who view this album as, you know, revealing more of Stephanie, like Stephanie Germanotta, revealing more of who Gaga is outside of the persona. But a lot of people also view this as just kind of a lukewarm project that just didn't really have much cultural impact or relevance. I do respect what this album was going for. It felt like Lady Gaga was kind of like in her Republican era, but I feel what it was trying to do more than I feel the actual impact of the album itself. Like, it's more of a necessary chapter in Gaga's overall story than a project that really moved the needle or changed anything for her at all. I really do feel like the Cheek to Cheek jazz album did more to alter the public's persona of who she was than Joanne did. Joanne feels like an overcorrection in terms of trying to garner some type of like legitimacy in terms of the public perception. Like, if you think back to the songs that really cement this era, it's like, what, Perfect Illusion? What even was on this album besides Dancing in Circles, which is a song that I really loved? I don't remember this album really having any staying power, like any lasting effect. Perfect Illusion was such a nothing burger of a song. Like, it literally, I remember it being like, after Cheek to Cheek, it was like, what's Gaga gonna do next? And then Perfect Illusion came out and it was like, Perfect Illusion has the same cultural relevance as Stupid Love, which is just like none at all. But we'll get to Chromatica for sure. If you were to ask someone to name Gaga albums, a lot of people would even forget this album is part of the conversation. Sometimes I do think that there are albums that are healthier for the artists themselves than they are for, say, the general, you know, shifting culture conversation. And this one, I would say, definitely falls in line with that. Now, if you don't include Cheek to Cheek, this is one of Gaga's first side quests. And it's really when Gaga first started to lean into, you know, the actress bag, the more like, you know, I'm doing this for the Academy type of bag. And that is A Star Is Born. Oh my gosh. A Star Is Born was a massive, expansive event for Lady Gaga's career. I wouldn't say it's core Gaga in the same way that, say, like the Fame Monster, Born This Way were like core who Lady Gaga is as an artist. But this soundtrack is impossible to ignore on the grounds of cultural, commercial, and like prestige recognition. Just a couple of impactful facts from this album. The soundtrack debuted at #1 of the Billboard 200. Shallow, far from the shallow now. That song reached #1 on the Hot 100. That song won the Oscar for the best original song, and Billboard noted that it became the longest charting Oscar-winning song on the Hot 100. Shallow is one of those songs that, like, it becomes an instant classic. I would argue that Gaga has a few instant classics under her belt, and Shallow is up there. Shallow currently has 3 billion listens. The only song on Spotify that has more streams than Shallow is Die With A Smile, the song that I just mentioned. Like, that song was massive. Can we consider the fact that Gaga at this point had already been in the game for like over a decade? And then this song, this whole album comes out, this movie comes out, and it literally completely destroys the records for her like highest performing singles. I put this album in a category of like a side quest. Like I said, I don't think it really represents Gaga as an artist, but it still adds to her story. And even though it's like a side quest, it's a massive side quest. The movie was huge. Lady Gaga acted her ass off in that movie, and I think everybody recognized it. Like, it really helped to elevate her reputation as a phenomenal actress. And the fact that she wrote a good chunk of the music just drives home the fact that the emotional core of this album still feels like it belongs to her, whether or not it's like a solo album by Lady Gaga. Like, yeah, this was not a traditional Gaga entry that we would consider usually a part of her, like, you know, general discography, but you cannot win an Oscar, have a #1 soundtrack, and have the song Shallow be added to every single karaoke machine in the country and still say that this is not one of her most impactful records. Then after A Star Is Born comes the album that I feel, and I'm going to get a lot of crap for this, I already know, I feel like Chromatica is the most overrated Lady Gaga album. I know. I said it, and I should be executed. I get it. I know. That album is not as good as people like to make it seem that it is, in my opinion. Now, I do think that the impact of Chromatica suffered a lot from just the timing. Like, Chromatica was released, if I remember correctly, it was like the tail end of the pandemic. Like, this is when you kind of started hanging around your friends and stuff again, but you still weren't like standing close to people, you know, in a grocery store or whatever. Remembering this album, I remember Rain on Me. I remember Stupid Love, which was a single that when I first heard it, I knew I didn't like it. And I don't think I've listened to Stupid Love since that era. I did a video reacting to it, and I definitely got some flack because me and my friend were not a huge fan. Fans, Little Monsters, often remember Chromatica as like emotionally important and really transformative for Gaga as an artist in terms of like what she was telling us this album meant to her. But I think it struggles a bit more when it comes to cultural relevance outside of, say, Rain on Me. Like, I think a lot of people remember Rain on Me more than they remember the era of Chromatica as a whole. Like, I think it's kind of sad when the remixes album feels like it has a bit more cultural impact than the album itself. This was like one of the first times where she was like really saying like, I'm going back to my roots, you know, we're going back to dance music, we're going back to, you know, fun, upbeat pop songs. And it just like, yes, technically that was true, but the songs didn't feel like they were really saying much. And I know that she dived into a lot of deep, important topics like drug abuse and emotional abuse, things like that, but it just, for whatever reason, nothing felt like it really had the glue that some of her, you know, first couple of albums did. And for me, it was just like the excitement around Gaga returning to dance pop really outweighed the staying power of the actual album itself. Like, I think the idea of Chromatica was so much bigger than Chromatica itself. I just like, for as many Gaga Little Monster fans that try to say this album was like incredible and like really good, I don't hear anybody talking about it. I never hear people bring up Chromatica when we're talking about Gaga's best work. Like, Chromatica just does not come up because it wasn't good. It just was not great. I just truly don't feel like Chromatica had as much staying power as fans wish it did. But I'm totally open to hearing your comments and being wrong, because I could be wrong. But if you ask someone, what are Gaga's top 3 albums? I would be willing to bet you my entire savings account that they would not say Chromatica. Now, for these next 2 albums, I'm kind of going to speed run through them because I really feel like these 2 albums were like inconsequential in terms of how they are viewed in relation to Lady Gaga's impact and artistry. I just don't, like, no one is going to bring these albums up when you're talking about Gaga's legacy, but we're talking about all of her albums, so I feel like I have to mention them here. First of all, you have Love for Sale, which is Gaga's second jazz album with Tony Bennett. This album was important. It was moving and prestigious, but I think the problem with the album is that it is less disruptive than Cheek to Cheek because the status quo had already been shifted in terms of like the public viewing Gaga as a vocalist. The main narrative shift had already happened, and so it just wasn't as impactful as Cheek to Cheek. It did win Best Traditional Pop Vocal Album, and it was Tony Bennett's last final studio recording, and so I think the album will always have a important stamp in the history of music, but I think in terms of like cultural impact, there really isn't a lot to be said about the public perception of this album. It has emotional and like prestigious weight, but it just does not have the same oomph that Cheek to Cheek did. And then we get to another little detour of Gaga's where she's like, you know, delving more into acting and she's doing the soundtrack for whatever movie she's acting in. But Harlequin is no A Star Is Born. Let's just say that. I think Harlequin had some interesting character work, but failed to have any lasting footprint in Gaga's larger story. Now, I think this makes the most sense because anytime a singer dives into acting and they have like a song or whatever on the soundtrack of that same movie, it usually doesn't really move the needle too much. I think Gaga set the bar so high because, you know, she joined A Star Is Born as the actress, and then like no one expected the soundtrack to be as impactful as that one was. I think the problem with this album is that the conversation around it was not focused on Gaga's contributions. Like, I feel like A Star Is Born, because the story itself is about, like, you know, a pop star or a woman who's trying to make it as a pop star or whatever, it almost felt like a biography. Like, it almost felt like it was telling the story of Gaga and how she became who she is. And so the music just worked in tandem with that. The music just kind of worked in the same, you know, world. It really felt like Gaga was using the movie A Star Is Born to basically like make a pseudo biopic where she's telling her story about how she got to where she is. So the soundtrack just added to that. And that's why that soundtrack feels a lot more in line with who Gaga is as an artist. Whereas Harlequin was more focused on the immersion, the character work, and like the in-world movie storytelling than it was about like Gaga and any large-scale shift in Gaga's commercial or, you know, career cultural story. Like, I don't hate the idea of this album, but it does feel more like the album was for a movie that is separate from Gaga than it did feel like it was part of her narrative. And finally, we get to the newest chapter, the one that actually reminded people about why they love this woman so much in the first place, Mayhem. Now, Mayhem feels a bit different than every other Gaga era because it's still happening. Like, it's still writing its story. Lady Gaga is literally still on the Mayhem tour. This story is not fully written, but I mean, it's part of her discography, so we have to talk about it. I think the whole era of Mayhem is so impactful because it really reminds people about why she is such a generational artist. It reminds people about what she does well and what her strengths are without just redoing what she has done before. She is sort of reheating her own nachos, but she's doing it with like new sauce. It feels like an album of Gaga, you know, revisiting all the things that made her who she is as an artist, but also incorporating everything that she has experienced and everything that she is going through in the present moment as an artist. Like, she's playing the greatest hits with flourishes of who her current self is. This whole album feels really like a return to form. I don't think Mayhem was a moment because it like was equal to, you know, the impact of her early eras. I think Mayhem was a moment because it refreshed the public's memory of what makes Gaga fun and energetic, right? If you were younger and you weren't around for all that, I think this really is the best example of Gaga in her prime. Gaga in her Judas, in her Born This Way, in her Alejandro. Like, Gaga at her height, which is addictive, pleasant to listen to sonically, and conversational in the sense that it, like, I'm trying to think of the word, but it starts conversations. It's not just a body of work that lives on its own. Like, it bleeds into the public in terms of everyone has a thought about it. Everyone had a thought about Abracadabra. It's not structured like a just normal generic pop song. Like, Gaga has her ways of putting herself into this music, and it starts conversations that wouldn't be had if we had not been, you know, blessed with her contribution. This album was definitely more of a revitalization album than it was a, say, like, revolution album. Like I said, I can't necessarily come to a complete conclusion because the era really isn't over yet, but I do feel confident that I can put it in the ranking of her other albums and just say that, you know, with time, this could change. So, now that we have gone over all of her different albums and kind of what I think about it, how I feel like they've impacted pop culture, let's rank them. So keep in mind, this is my ranking. I know that you are probably gonna have your own thoughts and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, but this is my personal ranking of Gaga's albums based on impact. We're gonna say Harlequin at 11, Love for Sale at number 10. I'm gonna get some flack for this, I know, but I'm gonna put Chromatica at number 9. We're gonna put Joanne at number 8. We're gonna put Mayhem at number 7. We're gonna put Art Pop at number 6. I think it deserves a 6th placement. We're gonna put Cheek to Cheek at number 5. We're gonna put The Fame at number 4. And then for our top 3, we're gonna put A Star Is Born at number 3. Argue with Your Mama. I think it deserves that number 3 spot. And now for our top 2, The Fame Monster and Born This Way. Cedric Johnson, I am going to put Born This Way at number 2 and The Fame Monster at number 1. And I, based on the arguments that I made in this video, I truly feel like this ranking is justified. So yes, I put The Fame Monster over Born This Way, and yes, I sleep well at night. So please let me know what you think is Gaga's most impactful album in the comments below. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying if you don't agree with me, you're less than right. But you know, you do you. Opinions are opinions, and it is what it is. I love you guys so much. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next one.